Trying to figure out what game you should play next? Backlog of games isn't enough for you? Friend keeps suggesting playing Fire Emblem and you're considering it? You came to the right place. I'm Rio, and these are the completely biased reasons why you should play Fire Emblem. First off, you need some background on Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem is a series of strategy JRPG games produced by Intelligent Systems and Nintendo. The first game was created by Shozo Kaga in 1990 for the Famicom and was titled Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. That game, and the 5 that followed it, were released solely in Japan. But then, when Super Smash Bros. Melee came out, 2 Fire Emblem protagonists were included, Roy from the 6th game, and Marth from the 1st and 3rd games. Their popularity encouraged Nintendo and IS to bring over the franchise to the West for the 7th entry, which in the West was originally just titled Fire Emblem, but the full name is Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. Since then, every game in the series has had a Western release, except one, the 12th game, which was a remake of the 3rd game. At this point, the series has 15 mainline series games, with the 16th on the way for the Switch, and it also has a mobile game incorporating characters from every Fire Emblem game so far, and a couple of crossovers. The series has truly come a long way since 1990. What is Fire Emblem, though, as a game? Here, there will be some generalizations in broad strokes because each game changes up the formula, sometimes only a little, sometimes a lot, but these are the core elements of a Fire Emblem game. The setting for the games is medieval fantasy, with units using traditional weaponry such as swords, axes, lances, and bows. Since it's a fantasy series, though, there is also magic at play, both offensive and defensive, and most of the games have units that can transform into dragons or other creatures. The games are split into chapters where you battle against an opposing army in turn-based combat. The player takes their turn with all of their units, then the enemy takes their turn. The chapters usually proceed in a linear, straightforward fashion, but there are examples of navigating an overworld map, meaning there can be side battles between the main chapters. The unit versus unit combat uses various stats, but it boils down to the basic screen shown here. Both sides have a chance to hit, the damage that they deal if they hit, and a chance to get a critical strike, which for most games is 3 times the regular damage. Once that battle is resolved, you move on to the next unit. This continues until the objective for the map is complete. The most common objectives are routing all enemies, killing the boss, or seizing a castle/fort tile, which usually has a boss on it that you have to defeat first. Other objectives, though, can include having a particular character survive a certain number of turns, defense of a tile, and escaping a map. Maps also usually have terrain that afford units bonuses or penalties depending, which changes up the tactics of the player. The gameplay is unique and, as many fans agree, addicting. Each game has its own complexities, but some of the major features in the gameplay are things such as the weapon triangle. Swords beat axes, which beat lances, which beat swords. This system has been at the center of the Fire Emblem games since the 4th game, Genealogy of the Holy War, and even has variations such as the magic triangle of the GBA games, or the addition of a second triangle with hidden weapons, bows, and magic in Fates. Other gameplay aspects featured in some of the games include unit skills, beast transformation, pair-up plus dual strike and dual guard, refresher units, capture and rescue mechanics, the ability to take back moves made a limited number of times, and much more. These gameplay options allow for players to have varied play styles and helps keep gameplay from being one-note and boring. Gameplay in particular tends to be one of the most engaging parts of the series. Another engaging part, though, is the units you command. Your army is comprised of a large cast of characters that you can send into battle led by a lord, who is the protagonist of the game. A lot of the games center around these young lords coming into their own as fighters and leaders. The plotline usually goes, young lords' land is invaded, they're thrust into a leadership position to fight back against the invaders, and they discover the true evil behind it. You, as the player, command the army, which has a vast number of unit classes with different skills from the heavily armored, defense-driven knights to the speedy but frail Pegasus Knights. Some games even allow you to change the classes of your units to suit your needs. As you travel through the land, you will learn more about the world of these games, and over time will recruit new army members. Some come automatically, some are enemies you can recruit, and some have very specialized recruitment specifications that make everyone crazy trying to get them. Once you've recruited them, though, you have an opportunity to get to know them. Many of the games have what we call supports, or support conversations, which give insight into the characters in your army. In some games, you can even marry characters to each other. The more you use them, the more support conversations are unlocked, and the deeper you understand the people in your army, which makes it all the worse when they fall in battle. See, one of the staples of the Fire Emblem games is a permadeath system. If a unit falls in battle, they are dead, or simply unusable if their survival is essential to the plot. It can be devastating when your favorite character dies on a 1% crit, which has never happened to me before. Ever. You can, of course, reset the save to make sure they survive, but some people will soldier on, which for me depends on how much time I've put into the chapter or the character. Some of the more recent games have modes where the character is revived at the end of the chapter, though, for those who find this system daunting. Each unit has a set of stats that they start with, and as they level up, those stats will improve. The basic stats are strength, magic, skill, speed, luck, defense, and resistance. Each level up, a unit has a chance to increase these stats. That chance is determined by their growths, a percentage chance as to whether that stat increases. One unit may have a 60% strength growth, so they'll gain strength fairly frequently, but a unit with a 20% strength growth probably won't. Each playthrough of the games, you can have units that get lucky, stat blessed, or unlucky, stat screwed, which adds variety to the games if you decide to play through multiple times. Once a unit reaches a certain level at a base class, they can also promote, sometimes automatically, sometimes using an item, and sometimes into a third-tier class with multiple promotions. This is necessary because the enemies, of course, get stronger and stronger as the game goes on, culminating in a final boss, which is usually extremely strong. There are stats that aren't luck-based, though, such as constitution and movement, with only class promotion and special items changing them. The other stat that increases regards weapons, where if a unit uses a weapon long enough, they advance in weapon rank and can use more powerful weapons. The typical order goes bronze, iron, steel, silver, in quality for swords, axes, lances, bows, and hidden weapons, daggers and such. Weapon ranks also apply to magic and staves, although without the metal signifiers of potency, but not usually to beast units' transformation stones. Careful though, in most of the games, the weapons break with repeated uses. As I said before, no two games in the series are exactly the same. Want a game with an avatar you can create and romance a character in your army as you do battle? Try Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates. Want a game with deep politics and strong world building? Try the Tellius series of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn. The various difficulty levels for each game also afford players to play as easy or as hard as they want, although certain games are harder than others. There is no game in the series that is simply too hard, at least in my experience, and I'm not that great at these games. One thing I should acknowledge though is that some of the games, the most notorious being the Tellius games, are expensive or difficult to get, and they require a Nintendo console to play. Unless you want to emulate, a Nintendo device is needed for all mainline series games. There are Fire Emblem games on the NES, SNES, GBA, GameCube, Wii, DS, and 3DS. There's a lot more depth to Fire Emblem than I've discussed so far, but if I go too far into detail, we'd be here for hours. So I'll leave that basic outline here and talk about why I love the Fire Emblem games. But Rio, what about the title of the games? What is a Fire Emblem anyway? Heck if I know. It changes every game. Sometimes playing a large role, sometimes only being a passing mention. And in Fates, a game with 3 pathways, effectively 3 games to play through, although it's priced like it too. It's not even mentioned in 2 of the 3 pathways. So the Fire Emblem isn't all that important, despite being the name of the series. Anyways, on to my experience. I've always been a huge fan of strategy games, and when I first got my 2DS, I started looking for a way to satisfy that itch. I came across Fire Emblem Awakening in my search, and after trying out the demo, I knew I had found a great series. I purchased it as soon as I could afterwards. I did not regret that decision, and I subsequently played every game of the series I could get my hands on, which as of right now is every game except the 5th game in the series, Thracia 776. I got drawn into the series for a number of reasons. One was the variety of classes and the joy I got in training up my units into a dominant army. Nothing feels better than successful stratagems being played out by units I've been training throughout the game. I also love the characters of the series. I've yet to play a game in the series where I didn't love at least one of the characters, and usually a lot more than that. They're witty, tragic, fascinating, insightful, brilliant, and simply, in my opinion, the best parts of the games. Seriously though, I can talk about the characters of Fire Emblem for ages, both good and bad. And they're the main reason I keep playing each and every game I can, but they're not the only reason. I also get enveloped in the stories. Some of the stories get criticized, which is understandable. They're typically not the most original stories. But some are fantastic, and all of them are at least adequate enough to justify playing for all the other great aspects of the games, from the characters to the gameplay. The final reason I play is the presentation. The music in the series is fantastic, usually with very memorable tracks. The emphasis, though, goes to the 3DS games, Awakening, Fates, and Shadows of Valentia, in my opinion. Remember, FE fans, in my opinion. The art style wasn't always the best of its period, but it was always nice and conveys the world of the games well, even if not all of it holds up, and sometimes the character models in-game don't have feet. Simply put, I believe this is one of the most engaging series. It is good for nearly every type of gamer out there, from the casual strategist to the hardcore tactician. This series has a game for you, and so I hope you choose to play Fire Emblem, because you really should. I'm Rio, and thank you for joining me.